Okay, this is Chris. We're going to do some advanced bunker modeling in Blender. I'm going to go slow on this one, or try to. I'm going to try to talk through all the shortcut keys I'm using for the most part, and why, and what to look out for. I can't cover it all in one video. Obviously, this is a very, while being technical, it's also very artistic. Choices are up to you kind of on the shapes and stuff. I'm going to be trying to match shapes from a lot of flyovers on this one pretty specifically though. First step, we have our custom, our blend, and our bunker. So we're going to create a giant blend by joining Control J, vertexes, all, select A with all, M key, merge by distance. Now we have one shape with two materials assigned to it. We need to get rid of one of those materials. That's over in this side panel. It's not necessarily going to be on that. All these icons are a different place inside a different group of settings. But we're going to go down to the material properties. It's the sphere. And all you have to do in object mode is to delete custom 4. That will change everything to our auto blend material. That's what we want. The next thing we're going to do, the type of lip that I want is going to be, I like to use randomized on that, which creates just a little bit of uneven jagginess. And I think that that just creates a little more realism. So what I'm going to do is I need to actually join the sand bunker shape with the mesh. So all of the modeling that I'm going to do for depth, for smoothness, for bevels, for any kind of randomizing, it's all on one mesh. Therefore, we're going to go bunker, shift click our giant shape, and also do a Control J join on that. Vertexes, A, select all, merge by distance. Now, this time we are not going to delete any materials. We need two to stay, because when we're done modeling, we need to separate these two into individual meshes again. The problem, well, it's not a problem. Another time-consuming thing with this kind of advanced work is that when you separate these out again, it's going to lose their name. So when I join these, they inherited the name of the last one selected. So up in this corner, upper left, you can see spline path 31354 bunker / blend. So this is called the bunker blend because when I join these, I hit sand first, then blend and join. So it inherited the blend's name. When I separate it, it's not going to remember that this inner shape was just named bunker and probably had a whole different number string associated with it. So we're going to have to go into, this is the full list of all your meshes over here. It's huge. We're going to have to go over here and rename both of our meshes when we separate them after modeling. Because I have to do it anyway, I usually give them a more simple name. I'll just name it hole 2 bunker C. I have a method about ABCD. Then when I'm in my FBX meshes in Unity 2, I can easily see which bunker I'm selecting, where on the course it is. It's not just a random number. I figure as long as I have to rename things, I might as well make it make sense. All right, onward. Our modeling. We may or may not want to affect the surrounding terrain. I have on my other monitor a reference for this. This is pretty close elevation-wise. Let's say you wanted to make this little tiny tongue that comes in here a bit more of a hump, so you're going to be affecting the terrain around it as well. I would suggest any terrain shape that touches this bunker now, they also tab into that so that you don't accidentally separate it. So I'm going to select, I've got this rough shape selected. I'm going to select this custom over here and this one. That's all 3 shapes. Tab into vertex mode. Now you see all vertexes around this bunker are used. The only place we'll have to be cautious about is if we move things too much. We don't want to accidentally move any of these vertices over here and separate them from meshes. So, all right, first step. I'm going to repeat some things I've done before. I'm going to actually slide this out a little. double click or alt left click to select the loop, G to move, G again, so GG. That's going to slide these all. Oh, you can see I haven't fixed the meshes here, so it's not sliding. Again, the reason is we've got some edges to clean up. This is a brand new bunker. I haven't cleaned anything on either. I'm actually going to pause the video here. I'll do all those cleanups and then we'll restart the modeling. If you need to see how to clean those up, there's a whole other video on that. Okay, all these edges are cleaned up on the tight spots, so now we can do that G to grab, G to slide. And we're going to bring these all in. Again, we're just spacing things out so we get a little more consistent shape when we're dropping our lip and our slope on the outside. Again, I'm going to add Control R for adding a loop. I'm going to add a loop around right here. I'm going to bring it up close to the lip. There's no specific amount it needs to be, just something kind of tighter than what the others are. The rest of these kind of even spacing. Then I think I can probably get away. Well, I've been doing 2. We'll add 2 to there, like that. And I think we already did this, didn't we? We're going to just space those out just a little bit. Okay, now we got pretty even spacing all the way around. This kind of thing on the adjoining shapes, this is not a big deal because we're not adding loops or anything like that. You could clean it up a little. It might help. You can see how that's going to break that up there. It might help to try and fix this a little bit as far as how it's going to react. I'm just going to add just some more edges and vertices in there. I don't really think that it's going to matter, but you certainly can just kind of do that if you want. Clean it up a little. See, I didn't do this quite the same way as I've done some of the others. It's just nice when you have edges that radiate inward or away from vertexes instead of straight across in these small places. It gives you a little better, a gentler, more consistent curve if you're trying to shape it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Other than that, I think we're fine. Our goal is going to be, especially on the outside here, not to really affect this outer perimeter of this shape, especially on this side. But we're gonna start by going over. First thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna make a little more of a pronounced spot here. Whatever selection mode you want, we're going to grab. You can see there. I'm going to grab some vertices in this area. Don't have snap on. I'm going to turn on my proportional editing up here. Shortcut is, what is it? Shift tab, I think, but I always just click. All right. I think you're going to want to use the smooth fall off for all this because you want your humps, bumps, hills, whatever to kind of gradually mold into the surrounding terrain. G to move. Now the size of this circle is controlled with the mouse wheel, and the bigger the circle, the bigger the area affected. So you can see it's grabbing a lot of vertices, a lot more. If I make it really small, it's only going to grab the stuff really near it, right? So that's how you know how much area you're going to affect. The way the direction stuff moves when you use the G key is relative to your view. So if I'm looking at it mostly overhead, things are going to go back and forth, but not perfectly back and forth. If you're looking at it from sideways, it's going to go mostly up and down or that way, but you can't pull it in a direction towards you. I like, especially when I'm doing terrain work, to work strictly in the up-down. That's the Z axis. So all you have to do is hit G, and then without touching anything else, hit Z. You'll see a blue line. That means the only direction we can move any of these vertices is straight up and straight down, and proportionally anything around it. That's just the mode I operate in when I'm doing this bunker work. Because if you work in a different direction, like let's look at a top view, which is 7 key, you might want to work in other directions, maybe if you want to change the shape of your bunker and such, but mostly for elevation work, we're talking about up-down. There are certainly some times you might want to do this. If you were to say you've got a very kind of gentle curve here, You could randomly grab, just click one vertice, kind of near the border, all over the place. And if you're in the top view, using this, you could pretty quickly add some waviness to your border, right? So if you didn't want to spline something super complicated, and you didn't care about it being perfectly accurate, to the satellite, you could just do this to add some quick interest. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to go up and down. So I'm going to grab, it doesn't matter if it's 1 point or a few, over in here, and we're going to go G, Z, up and down only. I'm going to increase this, and I'm just going to pull this up a little higher, like that. You don't want to grab too many at a time. You want to use your proportional wheel to give you more of that. And then I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to grab a couple of different far apart spots, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to make it a little smaller. And I'm just looking for some interest, you know, something a little more random, like that. Just added a little more waviness. Now I know it looks a little bizarre. I maybe went a little far, more than I needed to. You don't want to get too extreme with things. Oops, accidentally deleted. But adding a little bit of interest is what we're going for. Okay, now we're going to add some bunker depth. Easiest way to do this is in a couple of stages. I don't know which way is probably best first. Let's go for kind of the lip, or the way that the rough is going to fall in first. We're going to go to face mode, select any one face in the sand, and hit Shift G, and that will bring up this menu. We're going to select all similar materials. So that's going to give us the whole sand material. All right. But we don't want to start dropping right there, because we want the sand itself to kind of be part of that lip, or part of that vertical that we're creating here. So I'm going to decrease my selection. A couple ways to do that. You could either do an Alt Shift left click to deselect loops like this. There's also a cool shortcut you can use, which is to use the Control key and then on your number pad negative to select less, or positive to select more. I'm going to use that. I'm going to drop out a couple of them like that. All right, now I'm going to go with, I've got my proportional, I'm going to go G, Z. Now I'm going to shrink this influence until it's just kind of starting to grab the rough, because I want there to be kind of a pretty steep grass lip leading in here. And I want the bottom to be fairly vertical. So we're going to go with something about like that. All right. Now this particular course doesn't have super vertical defined like cut lips like you'd see somewhere like Augusta. It has a very transitional lip, kind of mix of grass and sand. So it doesn't need to be super vertical, but we could increase outward just one more and make our influence even smaller, you know, and we could do another tiny drop just to give, and just play around with kind of our amount of influence here, just to see, you know, just give it a little bit more of a lip rather than a soft transition. So there we have something about like that. Now for the kind of the other tweaking of the bunker, it's not bad right now. The terrain shaping in Unity was good. The digging was pretty good. It's pretty accurate. If it wasn't, if this was kind of flat, all you do is just kind of grab some middle vertices, kind of fill them up a bit. And I like to not try to be perfect, because a bunker's not perfect, right? I mean, that's the point of all of this. So we grab some middle ones, look at it from a different angle, go, okay, I probably don't want those. It's getting a little too high up. And maybe I don't want that even. Maybe I want to focus on dropping this back side a little more. The front's dropped enough, so I'm just going to go, this is experimenting. All right, so I have these grabbed. Now I'm going to go GZ. I'm going to make a bigger influence, because I'm just looking for kind of a general drop down here a little bit. And you know, you can just grab, drop, grab. You know, I'm just kind of looking for, I don't know, until I like it. Maybe this place has a little more of a dip in it. But this is where I can't tell you how to do it. Just do it what looks best. And then to add maybe a little bit of randomness, again, we've kind of done this before, but you know, maybe you don't want the exact same amount of drop in all the way around. Maybe it looks a little, again, too consistent. It doesn't fool your eye into thinking it's real. So I'm going to grab just a few of these ones that I know are sort of on the top level of things here. And let's see how this works. This is kind of an experiment too. My goal is to make this drop-in depth a little less. So I'm going to grab just some of those, and I'm just going to bounce down like that a little bit. And then you might even have to come into the ones that are right next to it and just kind of soften that transition a little bit. There. So now it's just a little bit more random, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Then I'm going to go in here, and this is the reason why we join these into one mesh. Remember, the blend and the sand is one mesh right now. So we're going to go right click, or I'm sorry, Alt left click or double click if you have the add-on to grab that loop and the one more inside it. Right click and R. R is the shortcut for randomized vertices. It's going to look crazy, but that's too much. So this little menu down here, we're going to change this to about 0.018. You can mess around somewhere between 0.015 and 0.02 is generally pretty decent. So you can see what that did. It gave us just a hint of kind of a jagged, rough edge. It's going to help with making it look less perfect, which is the entire goal of this exercise. So there we go. Okay, so now I zoomed into this upper left corner, and I am going to show how to do kind of that undercut lip where you've got this overhang almost of dry grass and stuff. Now this is tricky, or it can be. It can cause a whole bunch of additional problems, but it's not overly complicated if you take it step by step. What we need to do is create this pink blend shape coming over the top of, and then the sand coming underneath, right? So I'm going to go make sure that these are all merged. Okay, so in here, what we want to do is we want this to be pretty steep. So we're just going to do this in this area. And this is only something that can be done with careful selections and working in very certain areas. So this is where we want it to overhang. Now, like I said, moving stuff is view dependent, but it's okay if it's a little close and no cigar. In fact, if we go to the overhead here, we want to take this, and maybe we want to actually take some of that next row, and we want to move it, and it's some of it surrounding, not a lot of the surrounding ones. We want to move them so they start looking like they're coming over the top, right? So we're going to give a little help by pulling these. I'm in the top view, which is 7, so I'm only moving it. I'm not moving up and down at all, just back and forth. So we're going to go like that. I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to move those side ones so it's a little more nice transition. All right, we've got it overhanging. Now what we need to do is create the second loop in, or the, not the border loop, but this loop. We want that to go underneath. First, we need to probably create some space. So we're going to grab some of these in here. We need to lower this so that there's room for that to happen. Okay, so I'm going to go G, Z, so I'm only moving up and down. And then we're going to try and drop this down a little bit, and we can smooth out some of this later. or we can just grab the edge ones and drop them a little more like that. So we're creating some room to do that over here. Now the easiest way to do this, it's hard to grab just the ones you want under here. So if you take the whole outer loop like that, and then you turn on Xray, we have the whole loop. We don't want the whole loop, so we're going to Control left click to deselect everything we don't want. Zoom in here, and I'm just going to try and figure out where exactly it was that this starts going underneath. About there. And we don't need any of these. Alright, so is that, turn off Xray, get rid of a few more of these. Alright, so this is the area we want to pull underneath to create that overhang. Alright, we're going to go to our top view, and right now you can see it's pretty much a straight drop. But what we're going to do, and you can kind of only do this in one generally straight area at a time, because if it's a curve, you can only pull it in one direction, so you're going to have to do it in parts. But do it on a straight section like this. We're going to turn Xray on. Now with Xray on, you can see that as I move these, you're going to be able to, I'm going to turn, I have proportional on, but I'm going to mouse wheel it all the way to basically no influence. As you see these go into the blend shape, that actually is showing that it's underneath the blend right now, okay? So it doesn't have to be far to make that shadow, just a little bit. So if I get in here even farther, you can see where this is. I'm just gonna go under a little bit like this, okay? Now if I turn this off and rotate, you can see from a side view that I've come backwards underneath it, just like that. Maybe I want to drop it down just a little bit. Maybe I want to take some of these and drop them down just a little bit. Just however you think it looks best, right? Now here we have one of those pointy spots, right? We've created a really sharp change in direction. And not only that, we created a sharp change in direction where there's a border between materials, so the blend will be poor, right? So we're going to select that row of vertexes, just like that. Just the ones that are part of that overhang. And this is where we're going to do another one of those bevels. Control B. Now, it might be easier to see this if you're in edge mode. So we're going to Control B. Now we just want to do a little tiny bevel, and you could do just as one, or you could do it as two. But I think one is all you really are going to need here. Now, I talked about this in the other video a little bit. I'll explain it maybe more in depth here. You're going to get texture stretching if it's a straight vertical face. We can't avoid having a vertical face here. We want it to be because it's going to soften that pointiness. But we don't want it to be very big either. It's figuring out what works best, because if it's too big, you're going to see that texture more and you're going to see the stretch more. If it's too small, it looks too pointy. So it's kind of an experimental thing. Just be aware that you're going to see more stretching if you make it bigger. And you can, here's a good place to see the bevel. The more bevel you have, the more round over that is. On something this small, it's not going to matter too much. Usually sticking with just one and a really small face is just going to help a lot. Now we're going to change that. This is all one shape, right, with two materials. We're going to, with it still selected after beveling without clicking again so it doesn't go away, we're going to go over here to the materials and change it to blend, okay, because we want that to still be some of that grass. Now the interesting thing about this sand that goes cut back, it's going to receive a texture, and it'll be our red painted lip texture, right? And you could also paint these vertices red if you want more lip, because you're really not going to see this sand at all because of the direction it faces. The golfer is going to be up here. They're probably never going to see it. It's just going to be give us that awesome shadow to make it look like an overhang. The one thing you can do to fix the transition, make it a little more natural, if you go to where the bevel ends, where you stop the bevel and you zoom in there, it makes this try. You can grab that one vertice and just slide it down a bit and connect it up here, join. And that's just going to give you a little better geometry, and you can do the same thing here. And that just gives you a nice transition into that more standard flat lip. So again, grab this that made a tiny triangle, space it out a little bit, join it there, join it down here. And that's really all you need to do. That's going to create that cool overhang, which is really just creating an awesome shadow, right? And then using vert painting to make it convincing. All right, onward to the next thing. Let's skip out and keep going. Way more you can do with it. Maybe you're looking at it in some bunkers, especially older bunkers that have been around a while. Sand is actually built up from the splash zone, so they have a little bit more of a raised area here. You could grab that. I'm just looking at my reference picture. There's a little bit of a hump going on through here. Here you can see this is a perfect example of why we've fixed and why we like loops. So look at what happens if I try and raise. I want a raised kind of outer, almost a mini dike out here, right? But there isn't a loop here. There's no connection between these two vertices. There's these triangles going all the way through. Watch what happens when I try and make a raised kind of single hillock here. So I go GZ. This is extreme, but to example. You see what happened? That doesn't look right. So that's why we've been doing a lot of this mesh fixing, so that when we do those movements inside of bunkers, we don't end up with that kind of look. If you join those and you end up with kind of that continuous loop, then, oops, wrong key, G, then you get kind of that consistent look. Now that's a little pointy because we didn't add any extra geometry out here, because that's why we add these extra loops, so that when we make these elevation changes, we don't get pointy tops and things like that, because that's not convincing. So one thing I can do here, and this is not something I have been doing much, but you can take that edge and bevel it. That would be a shortcut of Control B. And you can see that's going to split it and soften it. Now when you do that, you can use the mouse wheel to increase cuts. So if you're doing a big round over, you can do a lot of cuts. You don't want to add a ton of geometry, but a little is fine. So that gives the top of that little mound some more softness. It's not so pointed. You're going to see that especially the bevel tool creates some wildly crazy faces like this. The game engine and Blender do just fine with this. This is not a problem. It becomes a problem if you want to modify the elevation or geometry, but you don't have to go in here and add like that. You certainly can. I mean, you could even collapse all these really like that. But the more you collapse, the more you're going to start seeing the triangles as you create stuff. So more geometry equals smoother transitions between things. So I'm actually going to go out of this. I'm not even going to do that bevel. Another thing you can do is you can add loops like this. The way that works is that's adding two loops at once, and it will radiate from whatever center selection you have. That is Control-Shift-R. And then as you drag, it's gonna loop out like that. It's sort of like bevel. It won't soften the elevation work you did. You still see there's a peak there. So that's a different thing. I would do that before you do the elevation work, and then you won't get that peak. So two different ways to do it. I guess if I'm going to stick with this little hill I made, I might as well bevel it. I think that will look better. So this is going to look just a little odd because I recorded this later, but I came back to it because I forgot to talk about smoothing. It's a pretty small portion. This bunker that we're working on right now doesn't even require it all that much, but I just want to show what it is and how it works. Let's say when you were making some of these adjustments to the elevation and randomness, let's say you ended up with, oh, I have snap on. Let's say we ended up with something that looked, you know, you're generally happy with the way, the shape of the bunker and the way it looked, but there were some parts that were a little more harsh than you intended. Like there's a dip there and a high part there, and you're not a big fan of that. You like the overall shape, but maybe there's some areas that just look a little bit unnatural to your eye. So smoothing is only going to work within one material. Even if you have a joined mesh, and this has already been separated, but even if you have a joined mesh, but there are two materials assigned to it, it's just not going to work well over that. It's something to do with the geometry or the material assignment. So what I would say is if you want to smooth a bunker out like this, go to face and select all that material. I guess because this is just a single mesh, it would be a select all with the A key. And then you're going to want to deselect the border at the very minimum, because you do not want to affect the surrounding mesh or how it connects to the surrounding mesh, because this is going to move vertices around. I am also going to deselect this next loop because that is also one I randomized. I don't want to lose that randomization. I like that. I don't want it to smooth it out. So now we have that all selected. So right click, smooth, or you could do the O. Hang on a second. Right? What am I? Yeah, I'm sorry. So once you have it all selected, right click and either go down to smooth, or you can just right click O. Down here, it's going to show you, I think the default, it's going to have all the axes selected and it's going to be at 1. So you can see it's a little smoother, right? A little bit, not a ton. By dragging either the smoothing amount all the way up, or by dragging the how many times it runs the function, it's going to continue to smooth. Now you can see I have all axes selected, so it is not just moving them up and down, it's pulling them in and out, anything it needs to make them smoother. Sometimes there's a benefit to only doing the smoothing in the Z axis, which again means just up and down. So you'll see now when I roll this, the vertices are not moving closer together, they're just averaging on an up-down. And I think that works the best for this bunker smoothing. So just find somewhere where it looks about how you want it. You can see it's not doing anything to those outer two randomized loops. And that'll give you kind of a more natural feel. Now, if there's somewhere in here like that's specifically a bit rougher than the other areas, like this one, you can see there's still a couple points in there. Maybe you want that. You want some of that chaos in here, right? But if you don't, you can just select just those vertices only. You can go in here and you can smooth. Maybe you need to try more than just the Z axis to get these to smooth. So there you can see pretty nice and smooth now, right? And then also another thing this can be good for is when you have these tight corners and you end up with vertices that get very close together, because as you've slid them down there, they get tighter together, right? None of these are too bad, but if this smooth tool works well for this too. If you go into an area like this, where the vertices are getting really tight, let's make them even tighter just to show you. So if they got really tight like that, you can use smooth, and if you have XY select, you could deselect Z, and if you have XY selected, smooth will sometimes help you out by just giving them some breathing room. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. It's just something to try. But that's how the smooth works. Again, don't use it across stuff. So if you had, oh geez. So if you had all these still selected and you were in here editing and you didn't like something about this whole transition between here, it's not going to work to smooth here. One problem is these are separate meshes. Even though this is all one mesh, even though it's different materials, these are two separate meshes. If you were to try and smooth the vertices, it's going to separate those meshes, right? Because they're not connected. So it does not work to smooth across materials. Just stick to, for instance, just the bunker. Or if you're in the rough and you see somewhere where you want to add, a big mound here, but you just think it looks too jaggy, you could select everything around it and smooth, and that would help with that. So that's the smooth tool. All right, onward. There we go. One thing to look out for, where shapes transition. So you've got the blend to the rough. There's going to be vert colors on either side of this that are going to blend them together. Blends work best when the geometry is mostly flat or straight between the two. All right. If you look at this up here in this rendered mode, you turn on single, that'll make everything one color. If I were to deselect these, you're going to see a difference in color a little bit here, darker, lighter. It has to do with something called normals. And as you change geometry across different mesh shapes with different materials, it's going to create just a visual difference. And Unity covers that in a blend well if it's pretty flat. What I mean by that is, let's grab both of these. If you were to look at this from a straight side view, low angle, you can see that it goes a very small change in direction as it gets to the next shape. If, for instance, you had, let's turn that on, like that. If you had a big change in direction as you're transitioning from one texture to another, one material to another in Unity, even if you have the blend set up, even if you have the same material and same properties on both sides of that, you're still going to see a change there. The lighting is going to make that obvious. So the biggest thing is trying to keep it a pretty level change here. It doesn't matter if they're both at a big angle or both perfectly flat, as long as they're similar. They need to be very similar. That's why I've started making bigger blends, because if the blend was happening, in here where the elevation is changing quicker, better chance that you're going to have too much angle change on that border. So I like bringing the blend out farther away from the bunker to help alleviate that problem, help hide it. Let's see. Back to material mode. What else? I mean, those are the general tools. G key again moves things, proportional editing. There are different shapes up here, and what these are shapes of. Let's do an example quick. So if I wanted a lip that was more straight and then a straight across, you could do. Let's look at the difference. So smooth transition. As you can see, just ignore that separation there. This is, if you look at where the influence stops, it's a gradual change to where it's not being influenced, right? You could use any of these, like your root. So this is kind of the opposite. You can see the shape of smooth. Lots of influence right where the vertices are selected in the middle. This one, and very little at the outside. This one, not as much influence in the middle, lots at the outside. So if you were to do this, you're going to see, if you look down at the bottom where there's no vertices moving, it's a much sharper transition. So each of those just changes the way it influences the surrounding vertexes. Again, just play around. Let's see. I think we're probably on to the place where we want to separate our materials. I can't think of a lot. I mean, there's a ton of other things you can do as far as modeling and changing terrain. But those are the main ones I'm using for this course, and that's the way I'm using them. You can always, I'm just such a huge fan of random changes. So you can always go in and grab, and I'll do this at the end sometimes, you know, a few random things at the end, and just change things a little bit. I just like to play around on the edges of bunkers, and I think that with randomized vert painting is just a huge help when it comes to just making it look more natural. All right, let's say we're done. We are done. We're done modeling this. We have these are deselected. Take a look around, make sure there's no places where the mesh is accidentally separated. Here's what you do if it has. Let's do it by accident. All right, I was moving stuff and I accidentally separated from a mesh. Let's see, we don't want to lose any of what we've done here. All you need to do is turn off proportional for sure. Turn on snap and make sure it's on vertex. I like to use the circle select, grab a vertice, and it's not just going to snap to a vertice that's on the selected editing mesh. It'll snap to any vertice, including the ones that are its mate that are on this border. So go to where it's starting, grab it, hit G, and watch. Snap. If you get close, it'll reconnect. So you just go along and you reconnect them. Now, you might end up with an angle you don't like. You might have done something, but more often than not, if this happens, it's going to be a result of a very small change, a small separation you just didn't catch and couldn't undo. So then you can go back in here, and if you need to, you know, you can kind of soften whatever you did that accidentally pulled them apart. We'll grab these that are a little high, we'll bring them down. We don't have proportional on, so it's just gonna, yeah, there, that's fine, all better. All right, now separating. We're done modeling. We need to break these apart. So first step, face mode. Now this is why we didn't change materials. Shift G brings up this, Shift G. Select all material, bunker, P to separate, separate by selection. Now we have two different shapes. Grab your bunker. Put your cursor just over this list over here, and just like if you were to hit the I key, or I'm sorry, the period key to focus on a mesh in the viewport, if your cursor is over this list and you hit period, it will find it in the list. Awesome. This is it. So we're going to say this is hole 2 bunker. I think this would be C. And I'm just naming them. I started at the green and I just go clockwise A, B, C, D around the green and then down to the fairway, however many bunkers there are. I think I've already done A and B. We're on C, hole 2 bunker C. Now I'm going to grab this one. You can see it over here in the list. We need to separate this into two different blends. Reason being, we want everything from here to the back side to play as deep rough, and we want everything here to the front side to play as regular rough, because that's what they are. Really, that's what they are. They're mimicking those same materials. But because we can only assign one physics to each shape, we have to make this two shapes. So face mode, we're just going to select everything. We're going to hit the W key. I like circle mode for this. I'm going to turn on Xray because that makes sure I don't miss anything. I'm going to go to my top view, go down here, and I'm going to deselect everything that I want. I'm going to hold Control and deselect everything that I want to stay as regular rough. Okay, so I got that border. Go over here. I'm going to deselect this. Okay, I'm going to go zoom out, and I'm just going to deselect. And you could do it the other way. You could just select instead. All right, now I'm going to do P, separate by selection. And now we have two different blend shapes. This shape, they're going to be the same material, but they're going to have different physics. So this one will have deep rough physics. This one will have regular rough physics. Now you may have noticed that this doesn't line up perfectly. It doesn't have to, but you certainly can change that if you want. Let's go into this one first. Grab this, turn on snap. I'm going to move it like that. Go into the other one, grab that one, snap like that. Or actually, we're going to, and I've covered this before, E, extrude, snap to there. Now I select all of these and make a new face. Okay, let's go over on this side. I'm going to grab this one, move it that way, go to the back shape, E, extrude, boom, shake those. Now we have two shapes that meet perfectly at the same line, and the next step is to name them. So this one you can see it's got a name. We're going to name it the same thing, hole 2. Bunker blend C. So instead of bunker C, it's bunker blend C. And we're going to say bunker blend C1. And we're going to say hole 2 bunker blend C2. Easy peasy, all done. That's it. Now, of course, when we import these into Unity, if we already had the coarse meshes in there, it's going to make a mess of things because the old named meshes are going to stay. And to drop these into that folder, it's going to make duplicates. So another time-consuming part of this process is kind of every so often, maybe every time you get a hole done, you almost have to wipe out all your meshes you already did and import everything new again, because when you rename stuff, it's not going to overwrite what was there because it has a new name. So you kind of have to nuke everything and go back. So a little frustrating, but if you're pretty confident in your vert painting and your work, it doesn't matter. You don't have to refresh the meshes every single time you make a tiny change and things like that. Maybe work one hole at a time and just move forward. And that's how I'm modeling all these bunkers. The vert painting's another video. I think that one's already done, but if there's any questions on that, I can do more detail on that as well. Thanks for watching.